Hi everyone, it's Ren here. I hope you're doing well. In this video I will be talking to you about existentialism. What does it mean? What are the origins of it? Where does it come from? What has it achieved? I'll give you just a quick introduction to that, but by making an argument, which is essentially that's what existentialism was trying to do, or has been trying to do, is to do away with essential thinking. Doing away with essential thinking towards existential thinking, as its name suggests, and also as per Jean-Paul Sartre's famous saying that for existentialism, existence precedes essence. And I'll try to talk to you about how, in my opinion, that saying is actually misguided and has possibly contributed more bad than good to existentialism after Sartre, which effectively became moribund very quickly, to be superseded by, at least as far as the continental school is concerned, poststructuralism, structuralism, poststructuralism, postmodernism. Existentialism is not a sexy word nowadays. Now, why is that the case? I think this is all connected to existentialism and its DNA and how it was developed. So, what does it mean to be an existentialist? Well, I think that the essential aspect of being an existentialist is to reject the idea that what things are, and especially what human beings are, for this is what we can know best, are to be understood as a limitation of their possibilities. And this is what the idea of essential thinking comes from. Essential thinking for the existentialists, at least from Søren Kierkegaard onwards, were concerned with rejecting a whole tradition in philosophy that started with the very early ages, the philosophical discipline with Thales, and the, if you like, the pre-modern period, the classical period, pre-modern period, and even the modern period started by Descartes. So the era of the metaphysical focus until Descartes, the epistemic shift from Descartes until the existentialists. These two eras, although one involved starting the philosophical investigation from the metaphysical ground up, whereas for Descartes, he turned things upside down and said we have to start the investigation into the nature of reality from the epistemic or epistemological ground up. What can I know? They had one thing in common. More than one thing in common, but at least one thing in common. And that thing that they had in common was that if you like, the unit in which they measured categories was the essence. So when you look at the metaphysical framework of someone like, Heraclitus, for instance, when he says the flux, the nature of reality is to be a constant flux, a fire, etc. Well, I mean, from a certain perspective, actually, that could be seen in terms of a non-essential thinking, but for Heraclitus, that was to be seen in terms of its limitations. It is fire, and that's what defines it. And he also said that the metaphysical world was the logos, the logic, the order, the essence. Okay. Now, you find that in Aristotle, of course. You find that in Plato. You find that in all the philosophers that are metaphysically focused until Descartes. Descartes reverses many things about the approach to doing philosophy. Now, the thing that he reverses most famously is, the metaphysical focus coming afterwards, after the epistemic focus. So you start by kind of trying to figure out what you know, and once you've secured a certain foundation, you move on to what you can tell there is. And when Descartes says cogito ergo sum, he says essentially, I know there, I think therefore I am. If I doubt everything, I cannot doubt my own doubt. Doubt is a form of knowing, therefore I start from doubt. This is the one form I know, and then I rebuild progressively the whole the whole world around me, the external world, the world is outside me, based on, not doubting my doubt. Now, this is a revolution, but the problem is, and this is something that the existentialists rebelled against eventually, is that Descartes is still thinking in terms of essences. I think, therefore I am. In a way, it is Descartes' own manner of saying, I am a thinking essence that has certain properties, and one of the main properties that I have identified is that I think. And from it follows that I am. Therefore, I exist. So my existence follows my essence, right? So you might say, essence precedes existence. I determine that I think. It's my essence. My essence could have other properties, but this is the first that I've identified. And my existence follows from it. When Sartre says existence precedes essence, he's not inventing this position of the existentialists. The existentialists had that position since Kierkegaard, at least. But he's giving it a certain, he's giving it a form, and he's giving it fame, because it's a bit of a catchphrase. We remember it easily. And what the existentialists were trying to argue was that it is wrong to think in terms of us being limited to a thinking essence, the subject. The subject doesn't really make sense in existentialism. We are used to thinking in terms of us being subjects. We have a certain list of faculties. It also comes from Kant, Descartes, Kant, etc. There are things that we can do, there are things that we cannot do, and we are limited by a certain number of properties that we have. We are essences. An existentialist would say that's not true. Existence precedes essence, being precedes essence, which means that it is the determining relation is reversed. So we begin by what we do, and what we do is a form of being, because when we are in the world, we're not just essences that exist. The primary fact about being in the world is to do things in the world. We do things. We don't think things and do them. We're always doing things. And everything that we do becomes, in a way, a part of us, a part of our history. What Sartre would call the facticity of people. Everything that you do is, in a sense, who you are. If you're an essential thinker, if you think about the subjects, it's very different. You have your delimited subject, your faculties, you have your memory, you have your consciousness, where you have thoughts, you relate to the world. And all those are kind of rigid categories in many ways. Whereas for an existentialist, there's no such rigidity, which is not to deny the fact that we are people who think and who do many other things besides. But we're not defined by that. We're defined by what we do, and how what we do informs our being. But our being, our existence, is not something that follows from what we do. It is what we do. So, I am, therefore I think. I am, therefore I blah, blah, blah. It is not just thing, everything else. But being is doing. The raw experience of being in the world is one of doing, not one of thinking. But thinking might be a form of doing, but there can be many other forms. And my identity, as Ren, is defined not in terms of the subject that I am, the faculties that I have, etc., and that another human being has, but maybe I have a lower IQ or higher IQ, and blah, blah, blah. No, which is essential thinking. For an existentialist, and this is also the source of why existentialism was so liberating for a lot of people at the time, is that it's a true source of freedom, in a way. It's the cultivation of freedom, because it says it depends on what you do. It depends on what you decide to do, what you take it upon yourself to do, your sense of responsibility. You can be anything. In fact, you cannot quite be anything, of course. There is something called the past. Sartre had this Sartre very, very good at coming up with very eloquent, catchy formulas for existentialism. In a sense, he said, freedom is what you do with what's been done to you. So in other words, freedom is not this thing that we have because we have free will, because we have consciousness and we have self-consciousness and blah, 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 blah. No, freedom is just the fact that there's what's been done to us, what's been done to me, fundamentally, the way I was born, conditions, etc., like all these factors that could not really have an influence over. Well, it's my ground in a way, and this is what I'm going to be doing with it. But I can do things, it's true. I can quit my job, which actually I have done. I can do many things, but with what's been done to me, which is important, to not collapse into this naive idea that like someone who was born in a very, very underprivileged background can just be anything. I mean, there is a what's been done to us, but the liberation that can come from the idea that we can still be what we want to be by doing things, incredibly liberating, and it's not allowed within an essential framework, nowhere near as much. It places the emphasis on the unique individuality of every person, because you can imagine that if who you are is the, if you like, the combination of everything you do, all the facts that you bring into your life, you're going to be incredibly unique, even compared to the next person. And it's a philosophy that you can embrace. It's a very liberating philosophy because it allows you to live an authentic life. And authenticity was a great part of the existentialist creed. Now, why do I think, to finish, that Sartre was wrong when he said, or that he was misguided when he said existence precedes essence for existentialism? Well, I think it might just have been as good to say we replace essence with being. And if we want to keep the study of essence for other fields, perhaps we can talk about the essence of logic, and we give certain axioms and we say this is the essence, the quintessence of what logic is. Certain systems maybe can be reduced to their essence, but that does not apply for all things, especially not for human lives, and for animal lives most likely also. Although it's a bit different because animals don't relate to their freedom in the same way, but still, why even continue bringing up the whole idea of essence? Sartre did that. Why don't you just say there is existence and that's all there is? Because if you say existence precedes essence, you're implying that what you do defines who you are, but then that who you are, in a sense, can be reduced to an essence after all, whereas it's not the case. It's always fluid, and it fluctuates through the vagaries of our lives, but it never is an essence. And for that, Heidegger, who preceded Sartre by a few decades, I think was much more farsighted, and there's a reason why Sartre is kind of out of date these days. He's not really studied anymore, whereas Heidegger very much is, despite his very sulfurous reputation, political reputation in particular. And I think that post-structuralism and postmodernism and what followed existentialism was born of a frustration about existentialism not having gone far enough with getting rid of the essential form of thinking, remaining kind of tied to it. And you see it also in one of Sartre's books, which is called The Transcendence of the Ego. If there is a transcendental ego, I'm sorry, Sartre, but that means there is an essence. And it's interesting because post-structuralism in Foucault, and then in Deleuze, who is very much his own beast, and then in postmodernism, but also in process philosophy and speculative realism, there is and in the philosophy of Alain Badiou, there is a distanciation, completely distanciation from the concept of essence and of the ego. So in a way, existentialism didn't go far enough, or didn't listen enough to the insights of Heidegger, for whom there was no such a thing as an essence, really, even though he was always talking about essence. And I'll explain in another video why I think that he did that, and why, despite the fact he did and said that, and probably confused other philosophers, his philosophy is not one of essence. All right, let me know what you thought, guys, about this little video on existentialism and its origins. See you soon. Bye.